Shalom, giving all honor, all praise, and all glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Arachakwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles and bishops of the great millstone that rule well. And as always, peace, blessings, and salutations to the tabernacle of David, the four elect, scattered abroad across the four winds of the earth. And I just want to touch up on a narrative and a teaching that you got a few, jakes that are wise in their own conceit. And, they don't use discernment when they read. And this is something that most jakes that don't believe that they're Israelites, this is something that they would run with. So for you brothers out there that are studious, you know to look well to your going. We know that there is faulty errors in some of the information in the Blue Letter Bible. Because we know that the Blue Letter Bible is put together by small hats, another so-called Christian theologians. And yeah, though it is very useful, we use it in almost every video that we do. But the Spirit guides us, when we use these tools. We know what's right and we know what's wrong. Matter of fact, let me get this in 1 John real quick. Let me get 1 John 2 and 21. I'm going to start at verse 20. This is 1 John 2 and 20 and 21. It says, "But you are not like that, for the Holy One has given you his Spirit, and all of you know the truth." And that Spirit is talking about the Holy Spirit. In the KJV, it says, you have an unction from the Holy One, and you know all things. Verse 21, it says, "So I am writing to you, not because you don't know the truth, but because you know the difference between truth and lies." And let's go from there to 1 John 4 and 5. And it says, "Those people belong to this world, so they speak from the world's viewpoint, and the world listens to them. And the wisdom of this world is foolishness, as it is written." All right. And the Lord is not dealing with this world's wisdom. All right. The Lord said, Apostle Paul said, he have chosen the foolish to confound the wise of this world. All right. So you're dealing with men who the Lord is actually dealing with through the Spirit on a spiritual level. So they have a different way of, receiving, this understanding. Now, don't get me wrong. We search, we study just like anybody else would. But the difference is the Spirit is what guides you when you do the studies. Okay. It says, verse 6, it says, but we belong to the Most High, and those who know the Most High listens to us. If they do not belong to the Most High, and 2/3 of our people right now, they belong to this world because they're blinded by the God of this world. All right. They do not listen to us. And that's a lot of these Israelites that's on social media, all on TikTok, giving their 2 cents, giving their opinion, trying to debunk the Israelites, thinking that they know what they ought to know. So no, they're on there basically saying, don't listen to us, listen to them. And you don't want to get caught up in that rebellion, because our people, they're going to be rebellious until the missiles hit. All right. That's why the Lord is only calling back a remnant. So you brothers and you sisters that are still in the faith and you believe, man, hey, bless the Yahweh Shem Yahushai, man. Give thanks to him every day. But continuing on, it says, that is how we know if someone has the spirit of truth or the spirit of deception. Right. There's going to be a lot of many false prophets out there and false teachers. So you got to try the spirit by the spirit. So let's get to this. So Deuteronomy 28:68. And I saw this on TikTok where some Jake, who's trying to act like he's a scholar, he goes into it trying to call himself debunking the Israelites by Satan, that when it says Egypt, it's not talking about a spiritual Egypt. It's not making a prophecy. It's nothing prophetic. It's literally talking about the land of Egypt. So this is what he's basically saying. Let me get it in the KJV. And it says, and the Lord shall bring thee, Deuteronomy 28:68, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again, and there you shall be sold. Keep that in mind. And there, right? In this Egypt, you're going to be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. And we went over this millions of times. The word buy, it means to simply redeem. All right, you could read Numbers, the fifth chapter, around the 8th or 9th verse, where you had wicked Israelites that were exploiting other Israelites. And this is when we were under the Persian, the Achaemenid Empire. And it was a famine, and a lot of Jakes were in debt, and they had to basically mortgage their homes, and even had to sell their own people, just to mortgage, to stay afloat. And you had rich Israelites that was taking advantage of it. So Nehemiah was calling them out and cursing them out. But he talked about redeeming, buying back his people. All right. You look up that word buy, it simply means to redeem. Okay. But anyway, they'll say that this is talking about literal Egypt, because the New Testament, it's like the Old Testament, is written in Hebrew and not Greek. So we have to go by what the Hebrews say. And of course, anytime it says Egypt in Hebrew, it's going to be Martezarium. All right, which was the name of one of the sons of Ham. All right, he became the progenitor of the Egyptian people. Egypt is a Greek name. All right, Egyptus, which means bondage, but we know that the actual land over there in the land of Ham is Martezarium. All right, which those people have been removed and pushed out of there. And you had the Greeks, which was really the Edomites. They took over, the Greek provinces, and they took the Greek language and made it theirs, and basically dominated the world. And that's when the Hellenist period happened. And once that began, they started to rename settlements and regions and lands with Egyptian words or names. So that's how it became Egypt. All right. But anyway, when you go here, you click the cross reference. It gives this information right here. And if you're not being spiritual, if you're not discerning, you'll think that this is real information that actually applies to this particular verse. And then you'll say, well, if this is the case, then what the Hebrew Israelites are saying must be false. So this isn't talking about us going on, coming over here and packs on slave ships, and being sold on auction and blocks. Even though you can read, was that Joel, the 3rd chapter, where it said that we would be sold unto the Grecian, which is the Edomite. It tells you that we will be far removed from our border, because we were brought all the way to the other side of the world. That was a slave, that was literally a slave trade. Now, when you go into this history that it gives right here, you'll see that it's not all right. It definitely doesn't apply or fit this particular prophecy. So it says this this verse seems especially to point out an event which took place subsequently to the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus and the desolation made by Hadrian. Now, mind you, Hadrian was after, years after Titus. This was actually after the Flavian dynasty. If you're going to mention Hadrian, this is after the Flavian dynasty. All right. It says numbers of captives were sent by sea into Egypt as well as into other countries and sold for slaves at a vile price. This is what they put right here. And I believe the people who control this site, they know about us and they know that we use their site as a source to bring the scriptures out. So to offset what we teach, they had to have thrown this in there, because I don't recall this ever being in here, years ago. It says, and sold for slaves at a vile price and for the meanest offices, and many thousands were left to perish from want, for the multitude was so great. So they're basically saying that they were sent by sea into Egypt, and then they were sold for slaves at a vile price, and for the meanest offices, and many thousands were left to perish from want, for the multitude was so great that purchasers could not be found for them all at any price. So basically they wasn't sold because the price, like they're saying here, that it was a vile price. And there was a lot of them. So they were left unslaved. So they were sent over there to be sold, but they were left unslaved because of the price. That doesn't make any sense. But let's entertain, this information as, okay, there's some validity to it. How does it fit this prophecy? Because going back to let's deal with the last part of the verse. It says, and there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen. So if something is sold, that means that it was bought. But then it says, and no man shall buy you, which you can't buy something that wasn't sold. You can't sell nothing that's not bought. All right. So that's why we say to look up these words. That word buy, it means to redeem. So you're going to be sold. You're actually going to be sold, and somebody is going to actually purchase you as a slave. But you're not going to be redeemed. There's not going to be anybody that's going to come with a bag to redeem you from out of that captive estate. All right, that's literally what that means. Okay. And like I said, you can use the example in Nehemiah, the 5th chapter, around the 8th verse. No man shall redeem you. Nobody's going to be able to restore you, all right, back to your estate. That's what that's talking about. Nobody's going to be able to save you out of your condition. So you're going to be bondmen and bondwomen. So I went and asked the chat, right? I said, did Hadrian halt a Judean revolt by making them slaves, and did he send some of them to Egypt? And it says, yes, with important qualifications. Context, the references to the Bar Kokhba revolt from 132 to 136 CE against Roman rule during the reign of Emperor Hadrian. And I believe this is when Jake started to rule as emperors. Okay. It's a suppression. You had Hadrian, you had Nerva. All right. You had, all these different emperors that started to rule after the fall of Domitian, and that was when Jake started to get up in there. So, this was before you had Persinius Niger and Septimius Severus. and so on and so forth. Marcus Aurelius, this is right before them. It says suppression of the revolt. Roman sources, most notably Cassius Dio, describe an extremely brutal suppression. Large numbers of Judeans were killed, towns and villages were destroyed, and the province was devastated. Enslavement. Hadrian did not enslave all Judeans, but very large numbers of survivors were sold into slavery. Dio states that captives were sold so cheaply that the market was gutted. It's like you're glutted. Enslavement was a standard Roman punishment after a major revolt and was applied on a massive scale in this case. Deportation to Egypt. There is no evidence of a single organized deportation of the Judean population to Egypt. See that? Keep that in mind. But it said that we as a people would be brought to Egypt with ships. You see? And there and in Egypt, we would be sold as bondmen and bondwomen, and no man would redeem us. All right, it says, but there is evidence that Judean captives were dispersed as slaves across the empire, including Egypt. Egyptian papyri from the 2nd century CE attest to Jewish slaves and forced laborers there, consistent with this wider dispersal. All right. So you had a lot of Jakes that were killed in the revolt, and then they suppressed it, and then some of them were basically captured, prisoners, right? Then a lot of them were dispersed, and some of them were sent over to the land of Egypt, which you can clearly walk to Egypt. You don't even have to take a ship over there. All right. And they also said that he actually sent hold on, let me do this. Because it said that the slave market was actually in Hebron in Gaza. When you read this right here, it says, yes, Emperor Hadrian sold a massive number of Jewish survivors from the Bar Kokhba revolt into slavery, with many transported to Egypt. Following the fall of Batar, the slave markets at Hebron and Gaza were flooded with captives, and those not sold immediately were shipped to Egypt, with a significant number dying during the process. So it wasn't like, it was a high concentrated number of Jake that got over there on a ship and were actually sold as slaves. The slave markets were actually in Hebron and in Gaza, in Palestine, and the ones that weren't even sold, they just got deported. And wherever they went, I'm pretty sure they had to, go into labor to survive. But they said a lot of Israelites that were sent, they ended up dying. And it didn't say that, upon this conquest that, Jakes would die. In this particular verse, it just said that you will be sold to your enemies and no man will redeem you, buy you. So this is where they'll try to really insert this information and say that this is the fulfillment of that. Just like they tried to do with 70 AD. This is all done during the, the siege of Jerusalem, or a few years after. And it's misinformation. All right. We understand that this being a curse was also being prophetic, because this didn't happen in Moses' time. So if it happened millenniums later, what does it mean to prophesy? It means to say before. So the Lord was telling our people through Moses, this is what would happen. All right. And we happen to be right over here in a land that we did not know. All right. And we served hardcore bondage over here. All right. We've been exploited for slave labor here. We built this place up. And on the back of our currency is a reminder. All right. That pyramid is there to help you remember. The Washington Monument. The monument means what? It means to remember. So, yeah, man. This is why we have to, know the scriptures and understand them, so that we could defend it from, these false prophets, false teachers, and a lot of misinformation that's out there. The Lord will use us to confound people who are considered the wise of this world, the so-called scholars of this world. Okay? So, keep this in mind and, beware. All right? That whole revolt, the Bar Kokhba, that's not the fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28:68. Just going off of the information. Because it said in Egypt, you will be sold as slaves. According to the information, a lot of Jakes died on their way to Egypt. And in 2, they were already being sold as slaves in Hebron and in Gaza. And the ones that wasn't, they were just sent over to Egypt. But it didn't say that they were actually being bought as slaves in Egypt. So, yeah, man, I just had to, bring this out. And hopefully y'all were edified. I'm going to give all honor, praise, and glory to Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. And to the next one, Shalom.